How's it going, guys? I hope you guys are on a great week. So I'm back today with part 2 of my review in progress for the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Today, guys, I'm going to talk about Mass Effect 2, which I completed a couple of weeks ago. Been a little bit delayed getting this out to you guys just due to life and things getting in the way. But what I generally want to do today is just talk about the actual game now that I've completed. I think it took me like 60 hours to complete it. I did all of the DLC, all of the side missions, main story, loyalty missions, and everything, and really delved into a lot of the changes and obviously what the game has to offer. You all know, of course, that Mass Effect is probably my favorite video game franchise, and actually Mass Effect 2 was my favorite game in the series. It's currently, I think, still remaining my favorite, but I'm going to hold out judgment until I finish and complete Mass Effect 3 before letting you guys know whether or not my views have changed on that. But I do want to talk about Mass Effect 2, some of the improvements, how it compares to the changes in Mass Effect 1, and what my overall experiences were playing the Legendary Edition remastered version of the original Mass Effect 2. Now, of course, compared to Mass Effect 1, the changes aren't as significant. The largest proportion of changes and improvements absolutely were Mass Effect 1 with, the gameplay and the way that weapons handled and everything. And a lot of the core of Mass Effect 2 that is there has remained intact in terms of the combat, and I actually think that was the right decision to make, because I remember with the original trilogy, that step from Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect 2 was just such a huge leap, such a huge improvement. So yeah, a lot of the combat in Mass Effect 2 wasn't really broken to begin with, so I could understand why they wanted to keep it loyal. Obviously, it has the same improvements as Mass Effect 1 did, huge graphical improvements. There's lighting and texture improvements, 4K resolution. The game runs in a nice, silky smooth 60 frames per second. I played Mass Effect 2 on the PC version of the game, and I played it on the highest settings and was just blown away. There are some beautiful cinematic sequences in Mass Effect 2. I can think of so many amazing moments from the opening mission to the suicide mission, the Lair of the Shadow Broker DLC when you're on the Shadow Broker's ship on Hagelas. There's so many epic, amazing cinematic moments, and they just look even more incredible in the Legendary Edition. And I definitely found myself just sort of stopping and kind of just gawking at how gorgeous it all looked. And of course, the photo mode is back in Mass Effect 2 as well, so you can pause the game and capture, some really beautiful looking moments. So visually, definitely there's improvements in terms of the textures. Of course, lens flare is still back in Mass Effect 2. That seems to be a very common thing with the Legendary Edition. There's an awful lot of lens flare, but they did pick the right moments to use that. In terms of the gameplay, there wasn't massive differences, so I was a little bit surprised just over how little had been changed with the gameplay. In terms of weapons, you do still have those class restrictions in Mass Effect 2 based on the class that you're playing. So I actually chose to swap classes in Mass Effect 2 and actually move from a soldier class to a sentinel. Did not regret my decision. I really enjoyed my experience with it. I actually started off the game on Insanity, kind of dropped down the difficulty to hardcore, and I'll get to why I chose to do that shortly. But those weapon restrictions are still in place. So if you're a sentinel, obviously you're limited to an SMG and a pistol and a heavy weapon. Of course, all classes can use heavy weapons. And then as you progress through the story and get to the collector base, you can actually then do what's called advanced weapons training and actually choose to specialize in a third weapon. That could be an assault rifle, a sniper rifle, or a shotgun. I went with assault rifle, which for me definitely matched for my play style, but that is definitely different to the first game. In Mass Effect, in the Legendary Edition, they chose to make all guns usable and also, work well and work efficiently. So whether you're a soldier or an adept, you could still use a sniper, you could still use an assault rifle, and it would still be effective. You could still do a good degree of damage with that. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to specialize and train in it, but all those weapons were available and they did give you that freedom. In Mass Effect 2, that isn't the case. I don't know how I feel about that. Obviously, they are wanting people to really specialize in those classes, and obviously Mass Effect 2 introduced some really cool, unique powers to each of those classes, like the Sentinels, tactical armor, the Vanguard's charge move, for example, the Infiltrator's cloak. These unique abilities that were introduced in Mass Effect 2 do really make the classes feel dynamic and unique, and the weapon specialisms are the same way. So I didn't massively miss it, to be fair, and it did kind of work with my play style, because I was very much about using my powers and using combos and teaming with my squad mates. So I didn't miss that. Obviously, the way in which you can control your squad is a lot better in Mass Effect 2. Obviously, you can do shortcut prompts to particular moves. That makes the minute-to-minute combat a lot more dynamic, and that is where Mass Effect 2 very much has a different feel, and that feel it had in the original trilogy is still there. So if you were a big fan of Mass Effect 2 and you were worried about how much they changed it, you don't need to worry. A lot of those core systems are still in place, from leveling to loyalty missions and loyalty powers to bonus powers and that kind of thing. Those are all still there. The armor sets that you can pick up as well and customize are still exactly the same. Planet scanning is still in there, though I actually do think they improved it a little bit. It seemed to run a lot quicker, a lot smoother, and it seemed to be a lot easier to collect those resources that you needed, for leveling and that kind of thing. And of course, the core of what made Mass Effect 2 amazing is still there, which is the incredible story, the incredible cast of characters, all of the DLC being included in this, because obviously you have the Firewalker DLC. You also have Overlord and Lair of the Shadow Broker and Arrival. So all of those DLC are included, including Kasumi and Zaid as DLC characters as well, and their missions. Kasumi's is actually one of my favorite of the loyalty missions. So it was just great to experience that story again. And there's just so many well-written, incredibly voice acted, very real characters that I really enjoyed. It doesn't progress the story along in terms of the story very significantly, but that is not what Mass Effect 2 is about. It's about the characters. It's about that character, development and getting to know those characters in more depth and telling those very sort of real, human and not so human stories, and I really enjoyed that dynamic. So yeah, the core of what made Mass Effect 2 is still the same. It still very much feels the same. Now, I obviously played this on Insanity, and what I will say is, for those of you that are looking to play this on the hardest difficulty, the jump from Mass Effect 1's Insanity to Mass Effect 2's Insanity is so severe, you actually feel like you get whiplash at the start of the game. The enemy AI in Mass Effect 2 are so much more aggressive than they are in Mass Effect 1. Often you very much have to hunker down into cover, and that does very much make Mass Effect 2 feel a little bit more like a cover shooter. Obviously, the cover mechanics are improved in Mass Effect 2 as well. It's a stick cover. You can jump over and leap over cover as well. You can run a lot faster to get in and out of cover. So Mass Effect 2 the combat feels more fast paced. It feels more modern, as well as the powers that arc and move around enemies and around cover as well. So the combat does feel a lot more challenging than it does in Mass Effect 1, where where still the combat is still kind of an afterthought, you know, and it is really about the story and the RPG side of things and exploration, whereas Mass Effect 2 is a lot more focused on minute-to-minute action, amazing set pieces, amazing combat sequences, incredible characters, and that's kind of what Mass Effect 2 is all about. So definitely you really need to know what you're doing if you are jumping into Insanity, and it can certainly be a big shock to people initially. I would have liked the leveling, you know, the difference between Mass Effect 1's Insanity and Mass Effect 2's Insanity to be a little bit more balanced. I would have preferred that, so that jump doesn't feel as shocking or as different, you know, as it does. In terms of overall performance, generally speaking, the game performed very well. The character customization of pulling my Shepard from Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect 2 was so seamless. It was really easy. My Femme Shepard actually looked exactly like she did in Mass Effect 1, only without the scar, and she looked gorgeous, really rendered beautifully and pulled across great, which made me very, very happy to see, because I remember in the original Mass Effect 2 I had to completely recreate my character again from scratch because the textures and everything just didn't work, and she just looked so different. So it was nice not to have to do that in the Legendary Edition. In terms of performance, like I said, generally the game is very smooth at 60 frames per second. The combat is smooth and responsive, but there certainly were some issues. One, in terms of AI, sometimes your AI characters, particularly on Insanity, would just do silly things where they would just get themselves out into open and they would go down very, very quickly. So you do really have to micromanage your AI companions on Insanity level, especially, of, you know, telling them where to go into cover and what weapons to use and enemies to focus on and flanking and that kind of thing. So you do have to be a little bit more strategic, which is sometimes hard, you know, when you're in the middle of a firefight. So yeah, I would have liked some improvements with you know, companion AI to make him a little bit smarter. There were some times when the AI as well would just stand on cover. Garrus did this on numerous occasions where he would just stand on top of cover rather than getting into cover or behind cover, and that was very, very frustrating on occasion. If you're playing at a lower difficulty, I don't think you're going to notice this as much because obviously your companions are a lot more survivable, which means they probably can get into cover by the time they would usually go down. But on the higher level difficulties, that weakness in companion AI does very much show, and I would have liked for it to have been improved, you know, more to today's modern standards in terms of AI. I did also come across a couple of bugs and glitches. That glitch I had in Mass Effect 1 where Shepard's aim would get locked into a certain angle, so she'd be facing sideways but shooting in a different direction. That also happened on a number of occasions, which was kind of annoying. Thankfully, I didn't have to reload the game or anything like that, and it would sort of fix itself after a little bit of time. But it is still noticeable, you know, it is still an issue. As well, I didn't mention, but the Hammerhead is back in Mass Effect 2, and they didn't do anything to the Hammerhead really to improve it, like they did with the Mako. They did quite a good job with the Mako to improve it in Mass Effect 1, and I would have liked them to have kind of given the same treatment for the Hammerhead in Mass Effect 2. Your armor still feels like it's paper thin, like it's made out of tin foil. It's really easy to die. There's limited missions that you use the Mako, mostly in the Firewalker DLC and also a little bit in Overlord. So maybe because it's a DLC vehicle, they just thought it's not really worth their time or effort to actually tweak it. Maybe that is the reason. But I would have liked some improvements to the Hammerhead just to make those segments of the game more enjoyable, rather than the chore that they actually became. And then there were some really hilarious bugs where my AI companions sometimes floated in midair. So I think there was one where Miranda were on the mission where you get Grunt, and Miranda at one point was just floating up high, and it was just hilarious. And then I had some bugs where my powers weren't working properly, so I couldn't actually lock onto an enemy and give instructions to my companions to actually use certain powers. And when you're a class that does rely heavily on their powers, that's kind of frustrating, you know, if you don't have, you know, really good weapons like a shotgun or an assault rifle and you are using your power combos to do damage. That's kind of annoying. It didn't happen that often, to be fair. There were just a few times, and I think in the Lair of the Shadow Broker I also got like an actual T-posing moment as well of one of the boss fights that we were doing, or the mini boss fights. So there were a lot more bugs and glitches in Mass Effect 2 compared to Mass Effect 1. There were definitely more noticeable bugs and glitches. So it certainly seems that Mass Effect 2 maybe didn't get as much quality control as, say, ME1 did, but it didn't spoil my enjoyment of the game, and thankfully none of them were game breaking, which is obviously a massive relief, and I didn't really need to reload the game, so that was never an issue for it. But overall, I really enjoyed my experience with Mass Effect 2. It's still one of my favorite games in the franchise. I absolutely love it for the characters and story. That suicide mission was as epic, you know, even though I've played it, oh God, tons of times. I've played it a lot. I've played Mass Effect 2 a lot, and it still is as an amazing experience, you know, even so far down the road now than it was the first time I played it. So seasoned players of Mass Effect are going to love it. You're going to love all of the quality, you know, improvements in terms of the graphics and the textures and the 60 frames per second. And newcomers to the franchise, you're getting the best version, and it comes with all the DLC, which means it's just incredible value for money. So yeah, Mass Effect 2, really enjoyed it, and I have just started my playthrough of Mass Effect 3, really enjoying that, and I'm looking forward to experiencing obviously Mass Effect 3 and all its DLC, and maybe some of the improvements as well. I'm looking forward to experiencing that as well, and of course I will come out with my final review on Mass Effect 3 once I do finish and complete that. So there's my review in progress for Mass Effect 2. Have you played the trilogy all the way through, or have you played Mass Effect 2? What did you think of the remastered Legendary Edition? What did you think of some of the improvements? Were there any changes that didn't happen or weren't made that you would have liked to have seen? Please share those in the comment section below. Thank you for your patience in terms of waiting for this review. It's here finally, so I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on the game. Hope you guys, of course, are having a great week. Take care, and as always, happy gaming. Bye guys, I should go. What the frick? What the hell? You guys see that shit? That shit was bullshit.